of our deficit to our GDP, because now if deficit is still constant at a particular amount and then you increase GDP on the other hand, then the ratio of deficit to GDP will go down. So that means the deficit is improved nominally based on what you can see.
What about our per capita income?
Our capital income will increase.
Per capita income, that is.
There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
I mean, it's about $1,600 now. But probably to go to about $2,500. It's still far, far behind South Africa, which is about $8,000 something dollars. But you can understand because our economy is almost like 3 times that of South Africa. So the larger the population too, the lower the per capita income. But per capita income is also almost a nominal estimation too, because what it says is that if Nigeria GDP is 100 billion, for instance, and we have 100 billion in population, the per capita income is 1. You are just dividing one by the other. It does not tell you about how that wealth is distributed, that GDP. Is it that 5% of the people control about 90% of the entire GDP? Those are data that will be more relevant for planning and for knowing how you can, implement a redistribution strategy that will make sure the wealth of the nation goes around as many people as possible. Now, with respect to having a large-sized GDP from rebasing, it can improve our ability to borrow more. Because if your borrowing is X% of your GDP, and now you have increased your GDP, as mean your borrowing was 5%. If you increase your GDP by 100%, your borrowing has become 2.5% of your GDP. So that means it gives you more room to borrow.
And that's what right now the Ministry of Finance is actually battling with. Our domestic debt is actually on the increase. So this is not supposed to be what we should be hearing at this particular point in time.
No. This is just what will happen
in
by way of numbers. But whether the government will not take advantage of that to borrow is going to be a completely different, decision by the Federal Executive Council and the National Assembly, because they actually peg the borrowing rate based on the Fiscal Responsibility Act. They can't go above a particular threshold in terms of borrowing. So those are the kind of things we will see. But the downside, of course, for this rebasing is that it might move Nigeria closer to the upper level country.
Upper level country in terms?
Yeah, in terms of your per capita income and stuff like that. I mean, by the time you get to about $400, they're already looking at you as a middle level country instead of a lower level country. And what that does is that it deprives you of a lot of donations and assistance you are likely to get if you were a low income.
Instead, they'll be looking at you to give assistance to all those other low-income countries.
It does happen, because UK used to give assistance to India. They stopped it last year because they said the Indian economy has improved tremendously, and the UK is even battling with its own economy. Why will UK be giving India assistance again financially? So what it can do for you is it can make donor countries to say, yeah, Nigeria is no longer a low-income country, it is now a middle-income country, and it should be able to take responsibilities on its own without depending on donations and grants and all those assistance that comes from outside.
But how would that actually affect us if, donor agencies and donor countries actually cut off aid to
us? It will make us more responsible. We have nothing to lose. You see, we're making the money. Let's not kid about that.
We're making the money. Are we seeing the money, or is just...
No, we're seeing the money. We may not have achieved efficiency in the allocation of the money. We earn a lot of money in this country. There's no doubt about that. But we spend a lot of it running government. And some other people steal a lot of it by way of corruption. So these are the kind of problems we have. Maybe if those donor countries don't give us, in any case, what they are giving us is not significant. So we can afford not to be bothered about that. But what we should be bothered about is that when we rebase, our economy will become large, and then it will become attractive to investors. Most investors don't want to go to small economies because small economies cannot absorb shocks when they happen. But a large economy has the capacity to absorb those kind of shocks.
In all of this, how is this going to affect our money markets? Let's say money markets are, of course, the Nigerian Stock Exchange. How do we expect this to affect them?
I think the National Stock Exchange has recovered substantially. If this happens, it's not going to put money on the exchange. That is a fact. And it's not going to put money in the money market. That is a fact.
Why? Because we're going to have more companies coming into the country. And sometime last week, the minister...
indirect effect.
Okay.
That's why I say this rebasing is the soft side of it, which is like the advertisement. Now you must work on the hard part, which is to see how you can attract investors to come and take advantage of the large economy that you are showcasing to them. So there's still work to be done. These are just numbers. They are data. And data will only give you an indication of what is likely to happen. It does not tell you the certainty of that occurrence. So it's not a guarantee that it will necessarily translate to increased goods and services in the economy. What we need to do is to work on those processes that will make goods and services to increase in the economy by focusing on the macro variables and making sure we sell ourselves and present ourselves properly in the international arena so that we can attract investment. That's what this thing is about. So I'm saying this is the soft part of it. It's the easiest part. The hard part is how to translate it to investment, to increase goods and services, to employment. Because when we rebase now, we're going to have about 40 to 50% increase in our GDP. But that will not be consistent with the other side of the equation, which is that when your GDP is increasing, it means the economy is expanding, and it means more people should be getting jobs, and goods and services should be increasing, and inflation should be coming down.
And the real sector too should be growing as well.
The real sector should be growing as well. But what do we have now? You have a GDP that will be advertised as having increased by 50%, when unemployment is still 24%. Inflation, yes, CBN has done very well on that by putting it at single digits.
But according to the figures that was just released by the National Bureau of Statistics,
it has gone
up by 0.3%.
No, it's expected. I mean, it's not going to be static. And it's not going to continue to go down on a consistent basis like that. It might go up, go down. You know, you see those dynamic movements. But what is important is that while we have achieved single-digit inflation, we still have double-digit interest rates. And that is why CBN is struggling with all these intervention funds for agri. They just launched one recently for MSMEs and all that. Yeah, it's because we've not been able to bring down interest rate for the global economy. So you are now, picking some sectors on a discriminatory basis and trying to channel funds into them. There's nothing bad in it because, I mean, as long as those guys get the money to do their business, I support that. But it must be a temporary measure. It is not a measure that we can continue on a sustainable basis. It must be very short term, probably for 1 year or 2 years, and those things should be closed down so that we can focus on how we can bring the entire interest rates in the economy down, and all sectors without discrimination can have access to single-digit interest rate kind of funds.
So with all of this, the federal government actually has a vision
yeah,
to become one of the top 20 economies by the year 2020. With the rebasing now, do we expect Nigeria to actually meet that target of being in one of the top 20 economies by the year 2020?
Not necessarily to meet the target. I think with this rebasing, we will move close to the target. Because this might take us from 39th position to probably about 30th or 29th. So it's a big leap. But what it shows is not because government has done anything tremendous to get that improvement in the ranking. What it has shown is that we had achieved that ranking of 29th or 30th as opposed to the 39th that we are being credited with now. I hope you're getting the point. They are saying we are 39th in the world now. No. Meanwhile, we are 30th. So we have a responsibility to rebase our economy properly and then push our GDP out and get our rightful ranking in the scheme of global ranking.
Which should be 29?
It might be 29. It depends on the figures that the Bureau of Statistics brings out at the end of the day. But what will happen is that we will be properly placed. And the government will be very happy for that because moving to 20 they would have jumped about 10 steps, which is significant. Oh. But that 10 steps does not mean we have achieved it in the last 1 year or 2 years. It means we've achieved it consistently over the last 20 years. I mean, growing it over the last 20 years, and then we're just reporting it in an underestimated manner now. So that underestimation is what is being corrected by rebasing.
Well, thank you so much, Wale, for sharing your thoughts with us this morning on the program.
Thank you, Harriet, for having me.
Thank you. I've been speaking with financial analyst Wale Oluwo, and we've been looking at the rebasing Nigeria's GDP to boost economic expansion. Well, his points have been made. We'll wait to see how the figures turn out in December when the National Bureau of Statistics actually publishes them. And according to Dr. Yemi Kale, we do expect that This will continue over a 5-year period because it is according to international best practices. But just before we go on the program, Corn Oil is proposing to reward its stockholders with a 1 naira dividend per share. According to the company, the dividend will be